Second. Stand by for satellite uplink. Okay, we're good. Um, Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Cannabis Marketing Live. I am your host, Jake Litke, the CEO of MediaGel. Today, we have not one, but two guests. We have Danny Kirk and Filipe Duarte here. We are going to be talking about Reddit and AI and all of the ways that those things intersect. Um, Danny has been here once before. But as a reminder, Danny, maybe you can give us a quick overview of what it is that you do and what your business does.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jake. So our business, ReddiReach, does organic Reddit marketing for 7 to 10 figure brands to help them take advantage of Reddit's unique subreddits and tribes on there to find their true fans, as well as try to optimize for getting their brands recommended by AI search.
Thank you for that. And then Philippe, who is in a very different time zone from us, calling in from Portugal. Tell us about AI Peekaboo.
Yes, I am. And we've got a bridge just like the one you've got on your background here in Lisbon as well. And thanks for having me, Jake, and pleasure to be here with you, Danny. So I'm Philippe, the co-founder and CEO of AI Peekaboo. And what we do is help brands understand if they're showing up in AI answers and how to actually become visible in AI engines like ChatGPT, Perplexity, and Gemini, and so on.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm very curious to get into some numbers. We see, obviously, for our own brand, we have been seeing more and more traffic coming from LLMs. ChatGPT is probably still the most popular one that we're seeing. Um, and we've actually gotten leads through ChatGPT that have converted into customers, which is great. But we also manage organic for a lot of our clients. And so, and many of which we've been working with for years, doing organic SEO, content, backlinks, all of those things. And we're seeing that, the LLM traffic slowly increasing. I don't think I've seen anyone get over double digits yet, but it's going from
Yeah.
1% to 2% to 3%. Um, and uh, and Reddit is a great topic to talk about because it is both, I think, for mo many people that are at least familiar with it, a great source of authoritative content. And I think that's carried over to the way that LLMs look at content as well. So I'd like to start out with what both of you are seeing in terms of traffic trends for the companies that you're working with and how that's impacting their inbound.
Yeah, maybe I can take that first, Annie. I guess I have more exposure to that on the day to day, but then happy to pass that over to you. So we work with quite a lot of agencies, marketing agencies that specialize in SEO, digital marketing, but also quite a lot of brands and some of them in e-commerce. And the trend is consistent across the board that everyone's saying that they're getting more traffic from LLMs, from ChatGPT, and we go through that experience ourselves too. We get customers from ChatGPT, Grok, Perplexity, so it's not just from Google. And we haven't seen anyone, like you mentioned, cross the two-digit mark, at least in terms of percentage-wise, from LLMs. But for us, it's been growing steadily week after week, and that's really, really positive. So yeah, it's just growing across the board. Agencies tell us that their clients really want to start tracking how they're showing up in AI engines and optimize for them. So it's a really hot topic. Do you see any common trends, Danny, as well?
Yeah, for sure. Everything does seem currently up and to the right. Of course, that's easy to do in a virgin industry, which is great for us today. But yeah, we obviously are a single channel kind of focus relative to what Philippe sees, but we see the same thing for our clients that have been at this for over a year now. It's very similar to SEO or other content strategies where it's just a snowball that keeps building and building, and it's a long-tailed strategy. So for those ones, they're really starting to see traction. It's really starting to snowball. It can sometimes seem slow at the beginning, but if you take that long, kind of long view approach, that's really when the wins start to happen.
Yeah. For us, because we've as a business, we focus on marketing over sales, partially because we are a marketing company, so we have those skills in-house. And so we've developed a lot of content, right? We have hundreds of pieces of content. We've got an academy. We've taken an approach of providing educational content. And when the switch kind of happened, when LLMs started becoming something that people were using, out of the gate, it actually worked out pretty well for us because we already had quite a bit of content. And so, that's one of the things that we're trying to encourage people to do is, it's less about keywords, and to a certain extent, Google has already gotten beyond just, keyword stuffing, obviously. However, it's less about the individual phrases that you're using and more about the actual cohesive messaging of the entire piece of content, because LLMs look at the whole piece of content and what its meaning is rather than looking for some specific pieces. Um, how do you, when you start working with maybe this has happened, but we're starting with a new brand or an agency, and they're using what we'll call as like traditional SEO tactics. How does that conversation go when you start to try to explain that you need to have a more like comprehensive approach to the content itself?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we get asked this all the time. Oh, what should I be tracking inside AI engines, right? Because there's no way right now of understanding and knowing for sure what people are searching for and what the volume for those searches are. So what we always recommend, and we've built this into our product as well, is to start with what we actually know. So what are topics that in traditional SEO we're already sort of showing up for?
Mhm.
Queries, keywords that we're getting impressions and clicks for on Google, and then converting those into prompts because you may be showing up, and we know that from our experience on Google, even on the first page, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're showing up on AI engines. So, for example, for certain topics and queries, we're on the first page of Google ranking really well. But then on ChatGPT, we're actually not that visible for the exact same keywords that I use if I was to go on Google. But then on Perplexity, I am, which is interesting. And we're doing some testing to see how to best optimize for each LLM and what are the tactics behind it. So we're really trying to also, yeah, find that approach. I think everyone is, but I think the best way to start, coming back to your question, is by looking at what you already know that you're getting clicks and impressions for, tracking those, seeing if you have visibility there. And then a step further from that is also understanding the pain points that you're solving for your customers. And I think search intent here and the actual problems that you're solving for customers will become even more relevant, and build questions, prompts around those pain points that you're solving for your customers as prompts and track those inside AI engine. So those are basically the two recommendations that we always give to brands that we work with at the beginning of our conversations with them.
So let me unpack that a little bit. When you're saying you want to create prompts, you're trying to predict what people would ask an AI system and the way they would ask it, and then see what the results are. And if you're not showing up in those results, try to figure out a way to produce organic on-site content, or as the topic is, potentially Reddit or other places where you can feed more data sources into the LLM's response. Is that roughly correct?
Exactly,
Okay.
exactly. And there is kind of a way to understand how the LLMs are then breaking down what you're asking them. So if you use ChatGPT and you look for something, you can actually on your computer using the Inspect tab check the queries that ChatGPT is actually sending to Google or Bing. And then you have an understanding of what the LLM is actually searching for on the web. And that is a more tangible way of actually trying to optimize for AI engines.
Okay, so you do have the ability to kind of trace the behavior. So if I ask this question, it's going to go turn it into these queries at the search engines.
In a way, yeah. What's the problem or what's the challenge? Is that anyone can test this. I made an article on how to test this as well. If you look up for the exact same prompt, the exact same query 10 different times, you're not always going to get the exact same query fanouts, that's the terminology we use, which is basically just keywords that the LLM is sending to Google
Mhm.
in those 10 different searches. So then you have the challenge that the AI is always changing how it interprets your prompt and then how it actually searches for that information on the web.
Yeah. It's called the stochastic response, which is a fancy word for random.
Yeah.
Um, it's a little bit like a slot machine, right? So I do a lot of we do a lot of AI development, and even some of the newer tools like Cursor have now built it so that you can give the same prompt to multiple agents at the same time and choose the one you want because you're going to get, you send in three prompts, you're going to get three slightly different responses, and some are better than others.
Yeah.
Okay, so while we're on the topic, um, what do you think the biggest misconception is of how LLMs are learning and deciding, what information they're going to give back to you?
That's a really good question. So how are they learning and deciding what to get back to you?
Well, no, the question is yes, that is part of the question, but the larger one is because AI is new and it is a very complex concept to understand how an LLM functions,
Yeah.
right? People tend to bring over whatever knowledge they might have, a lot of which is going to come from movies, right? And they're like, oh, this is what's going on. This is how AI works. And most people don't really understand what's going on under the hood. So it's
Yeah.
easy and natural for people to make assumptions about what they think it's doing. And then, but if you don't understand what it's actually doing, if you're trying to influence its behavior, then that's probably not going to go very well.
Yeah. No, for sure. I think all of us are trying to figure that out. I don't think anyone has figured that out yet. I don't think there's a defined playbook. What I will say is that there are certain best practices that you can apply to your digital marketing strategies, AEO, SEO strategy, whatever we want to call it. I'm now calling it AEO, not GEO. One of them is updating your content regularly. That seems to have quite a lot of impact on whether you're showing up in answers or not. And there's plenty of research out there to show that from various companies, various agencies, and we also experience that ourselves firsthand. So that's one thing. Then the second, and a lot of these will also come down to just great SEO best practices, is making sure that you have structured data on your website. So schema markup, especially FAQ schema markup. And maybe this here is something that wasn't as common or isn't as common still with many websites, many SEOers. Like the way you would build a content piece or a web page, you typically wouldn't include an FAQ at the end up until a year ago or even months ago. And many companies still don't do that. So making sure that you have that schema markup for FAQs specifically, as well as the actual FAQs. So those are two really practical ways on how you can try to influence your probability of actually showing up in answers and how the LLMs are sort of evolving and looking for information about your topic. So the actual prompt or topic that you want to show up for.
I'm going to
Yeah,
hand
and
this right over to you, Danny, because an FAQ, I mean, Reddit basically is an FAQ, right? It's the same concept. But go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. I think as far as like those misconceptions go, it is that AI search is as simple as like SEO, where here are our top 10 key phrases or key search words that are relatively static over time, change maybe a little bit, but like these are the ones we're aiming for. And it's more along the lines of like what Philippe said, that you put something into AI and then it comes up with another search to then go search Google for or search contextually elsewhere, which is like totally different. And then add on to that the fact that, like you said, Jake, if you give a task to three different agents, they're all going to do it differently. Like the complexity of those two things multiplied together is just much more than other standard content marketing channels, which personally is why I think using a tool like a Peekaboo is incredibly important. So you actually have intel on that. But yeah, on the FAQ side of things, Reddit is an incredible place to not only discover what humans, there's kind of the AI search side of things, like what is the AI, what phrases are in there that people are searching for, but also what humans are saying as well, kind of both things paired together. So going into Reddit, even on a discovery kind of mission, seeing what's being said about you, your competitors, what discussions, what problems, what solutions, all that jazz. That's an incredible place to start.
All right. Well, let's dig in on Reddit a little bit more and how AI is interpreting the information within Reddit. I mean, it's obviously there. It's a great resource. It's a natural resource for an LLM to use because there's a lot of good authoritative content on there. So, in terms of the types of Reddit posts and conversations that happen, some are very short. Someone asks a simple question, they get a couple of responses, maybe some people flame them, whatever ends up happening. Um, is there a obvious delineation between a post that has a heavy original piece of content, like the first statement where it's long and thought out versus short, and then the next thing would be the actual conversation thread that ensues after. Have you seen any metrics on how length and discussion amount influences how AI judges that content?
It's pretty subjective, is what the way I would put it. So I probably wouldn't give a single rule of thumb. I'll let Philippe dive into the details in a second on what they see. But there certainly is a structure that AI likes to read in, kind of like a technical structure for the post itself. But then you have the commenting side of things, which is where it's looking for human interaction and positive sentiment, negative sentiment, and whatnot. So the two are pretty important. Philippe, have you seen any kind of details on like length and structure and whatnot?
I have seen posts that don't have any upvotes or very little upvotes and very little engagement being used as sources on LLMs. The same way I've also seen very lengthy answers to posts being cited as answers in LLM. So I don't think anyone, at least I don't, know how the AIs decide which posts and when to cite it and what they look for. I think it's very dependent on the actual prompt itself. So I'm saying this because I'm thinking of one or two specific examples I've gone through with one of our agency partners. We were looking or testing some prompts around music studios in Cape Town for one of their clients. And I remember going through some of those sources with them, and there were Reddit posts with very little engagement and comments in them. They had some, of course, and that's why they were being cited, but there wasn't really anything that made that post super special, let's put it that way. So at least from what we've experienced and just research that I've read and come across online, I don't think there's really specific criteria that that the AIs follow when citing information from Reddit. Now, this said, and I think this goes more in line with the sort of work that you do, Danny. AI generated comments on Reddit, I don't think those will get cited by AI engines. They're I think they're pretty good at picking up what's actual natural and organic. And I'm sure you've experienced that. I've definitely experienced that the AI comments and AI posts usually get downvoted quite a lot on Reddit too.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree. And this kind of all goes to our high level strategy as a hybrid approach. Like AI is the greatest black box of all time. None of us will ever probably know what truly happens on the causal nature inside of it. So, we interact with things that are posts that are brand new, with ones that are very old and high ranking, all different subject matter for our clients, because that's kind of hedging our bets and just accepting that we don't truly know. We can have kind of our ideas and see a little bit of what's getting ranked, but we try to take a blended approach due to that exact thing that Philippe mentioned.
And when you say blended approach, maybe I know you kind of touch on it a little bit, but let's look at what does that blended approach look like for someone who is not on, actually, that's another question. If what if you're just not on Reddit at all for some reason? Your brand, no one, um, people haven't been talking about your brand, you haven't been posting there. Um, how do you think that influences an LLM's decision to cite you or not? Is it a big black mark? Is it I know we don't have the under the hood, so we can only see like an imperfect view of effects and make some guesses, but that's what we'll have to do.
Yeah, I don't think that being not cited on there is a bad thing. I think that to me seems like a great territory to get started. A lot of people have kind of an inverse issue, maybe negative sentiment on there, and then that's harder to reverse than just neutral or none. Yeah, if they are kind of brand new, I mean, who knows? There's brands that come onto the scene every single day. New companies get started. There's no reason they would be cited yet. Going in there and really just trying to provide value, answering questions, understanding what communities you're in, the ethos of those communities, what problems that you solve for, what kinds of discussions you want to be a part of, and then just going in there and adding as much value as possible. That's a great way to at least get started and start kind of like laying the foundation. Philippe, would you agree with on that?
Yeah, I would, and I'll also add one thing. I think being consistent is probably one of the most important things. That's what I'm learning more and more, just not for Reddit specifically, but just across different social media platforms. The algorithms seem to love consistency, right? I mean, at the end of the day, in a way, we're all the product because what they want us is to be hooked into the platforms. So I think showing up consistently on Reddit and other social media platforms is really important. This by showing up consistently, I'm not saying you should mention your brand every day in every single Reddit thread because then you'll most likely get banned. So it's about doing what you were saying, providing value, and then sometimes when you're at the right place at the right time and your product can actually solve that user's problem, mentioning your brand in those situations. So I'd also add that consistency seems to be very valued by these platforms, and then tying that back into AI engines for a given topic, Reddit will be cited, but it's not going to be just one Reddit thread that's going to be cited. There's going to be multiple Reddit threads that will be cited. So this is why showing up consistently is also important, is to try and get into as many of these threads as you can.
And when you say consistency, that can mean different things. That could mean
Yeah.
pacing, tone. What do you mean when you say consistency?
Yeah, that's a that's a fair question. When I say consistency, I'm talking about the number of times you show up. So the frequency with which you show up daily. This is what I'm thinking. It's just what I'm finding about these algorithms, and I know each social media platform has its own algorithm. So it's about that, and then I think in terms of the tone and the structure, maybe Danny has more experience that, and he can probably explain better what he does with some of his clients in terms of the consistency with which he phrases the answers. But I was referring to frequency.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree on the frequency side of things. I mean, all the brands that I know that are winning, not even the ones necessarily that we work with, but the companies and brands and people that I see winning on Reddit, they have a daily practice, and that might be 5 to 10 minutes a day. Maybe they're not just stuck to the app all day long, but they have some kind of daily practice. And then yeah, the tone and whatnot. I think probably a consistent, just like any brand messaging, and Jake, you're the expert as the expert holistic marketer here. Brand messaging across the board, I think is great. Even furthermore on Reddit is just like speaking as a Redditor, don't sound salesy, don't sound too uptight, things like that. That's probably more along the lines of messaging consistency that I would mention.
Don't just copy paste right out of ChatGPT your message. Yeah, I wonder if they
No,
remember. They're like,
although
I generated that response for this person. I know that yeah.
yeah, bots
So
talking to bots, right?
yeah, on content pieces, we see this with SEO and organic content and same with Reddit, where we've had some brands where a really outsized amount of their traffic is coming from one piece of content that they happen to just hit a home run with. Um, and sometimes it's, it's not, it's somewhat, it might even be adjacent to what their business is. They happen to just talk about a specific topic. And so you can see, you've got one article of your hundreds that's, 20% of all your traffic or something like really large, right? Um, do you see the same thing I mean, I know we can see that with Reddit, but does that translate over to AI, search functions where a particular, the LLM is latched on to something and says this is a really good gem, and it's gonna just keep bringing it up, well, however the cycle goes for the learning. But have you seen any particular Reddit threads or posts just drive a lot of AI engagement?
For sure. For sure. If we're talking about Reddit, absolutely. I think there's a couple of key posts, and I'm thinking about our niche specifically regarding AI visibility because I've tested those mostly around us and which Reddit threads are being cited the most. There's a couple of key posts that are constantly being referenced by engines, and I think this is also part of the reason why certain communities, why certain subreddits, after given amount of time, they stop allowing comments on that post because they probably already know that people will go in those posts because they're on the first page of Google and being cited by engines consistently. And people will, especially nowadays, try to go in those comment sections and try to get their brand mentioned there. So yeah, we definitely see a couple of key Reddit posts that are constantly being mentioned by answers. And to anyone who wants to try and identify those. Start with Google, I would say, because what I've seen for Reddit posts specifically, I'm only talking about Reddit posts specifically now, is that usually the ones that are on the first page of Google and ranking high, when you search for a given query keywords, are also the ones that are being constantly referenced by AI engines.
Yeah, so as long as you're on the first page now, right? Because they stopped letting it index after the first page.
You mean ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, no,
So
I thought that Google, to the extent they can, like, revoked permission, essentially, to crawl
yeah.
past the first page, right?
Yeah, yeah. Also for other SEO tools. I think it's just become, it's not that they revoked, it's just become increasingly more expensive. I think 10 times more expensive. That's why so many of these SEO tools are probably struggling a bit with this. And it's going to be interesting as well how everyone in marketing adapts to these changes. I saw that Ahrefs was sort of rolling back these changes and was going to start offering tracking for up to the first 100 pages. But anyways, we're we're going off topic here. Just a side note. But yeah, it's the Reddit threads are on the first page of Google.
Okay. And then that's something I hadn't really thought of. I do know, I see posts where the comments are locked. I had made the assumption that generally it was because they just wanted to stop the conversation, like the moderators are like, enough, this. But I didn't think about the fact that it could be manipulated by continuing to add to the tail of it. Um, Danny, when you're looking at you've got a thread and it's really hot, is there do you got a timer in your head? You're like, okay, this one's only got like a week left before someone shuts it down.
Yeah, that's the frustrating part. From our experience, it's up to the moderators, and each one is a human and totally different. So yeah, we actually dealt with this with a client yesterday. Their particular niche has a few moderators that lock things down like really quickly, which is kind of weird, you know. And then some of them, it could be like 5 years old and it's still open. So it's moderators are human. It's not all automated. They kind of just make the choices themselves. Felipe, have you seen the same thing? It's kind of a human decision in there.
Yeah, I've seen both. I've seen both. I was looking up some Reddit posts for one of our clients, and then I saw that the comments were locked. But then in other posts, the comments are still open. So I've seen the same thing you have.
So just completely erratic. You just never know.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No, it's a human in the mix. Kind of another reason we take the blended approach. We don't have control over that side of things either. So we're just kind of doing the best work we can within those constraints while they're still open.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we know that Reddit is a pretty strong pillar for AI tools. Um, how does it compare? Again, I know that we have to just make some guesses here, but how do you think that compares in a pie chart of you ask it a question, ChatGPT, Perplexity, whatever, it goes out, does some searches, follows the searches, gets some of the content, is going to blend that in with its own knowledge base, right? The knowledge it already has. There's the concept of, backlinks and directories and all of that. That's going to have an impact on what comes back on this from the search engine. But do the LLMs themselves have any visibility into traditional off-page SEO tactics, or is it just naturally flowing through the search results that they get? I have no idea if they're doing this or not.
Okay.
Like, okay, I'll give you a more specific
Yeah.
example. So I do a search for whatever it is. I get back the top search results, and then within those, maybe there's like a directory that's providing results.
Mhm.
Is the LLM going to go, oh, I know this stuff about this directory because it's independently indexed that itself and weigh that in?
It's a good question, and I'm not sure if it's because independently indexed. I've been playing around with ChatGPT and how it basically how it decides which sources to give to users. And one thing that was interesting to me is that on the back end, when you inspect the logs, so when you go on ChatGPT and you make a search and it triggers the web search mode, at the bottom you've got sources, right? And then if you open up those sources, you have the actual citations used in the answer, and then you'll have a section below with more. And those are citations that ChatGPT decided to collect, but didn't use it in the answer itself, but found relevant. And what I found is that if you go a step further and you actually inspect the logs using Chrome developer tools, there's a few more sources that ChatGPT is saying that it's using on the backend, but then it's not showing that on the UI interface. And what I found interesting is that from the prompts that I tested, most of those sources were mainly media news outlets, and they were all, or not all, but they were mostly news outlets and media companies that had a partnership, an official media partnership with OpenAI. So that was quite interesting, and I was, yeah, again, just guessing or wondering why that is. So I do think that, you know, it's in the best interest as well of OpenAI to sort of try and push for some of these media companies to be cited as sources more and more, especially as they've got official deals with OpenAI. And the same thing goes for Reddit. We know that Reddit and OpenAI have a deal. We don't know what that deal is all about and why Reddit is chosen as a source that's being constantly cited by engines. And we also know that up until mid-September, it was the most cited source in LLMs. Then when that change to the Google's first 100 pages happened, the amount of times Reddit was being cited dropped tremendously, right? So it's interesting causation but not correlation, but again, just assuming. But now Reddit seems to be trending upwards again as being one of the most cited sources by LLM. So yeah, it's literally a black box. All I've been doing is just following and trying to inspect how things work, how search works, and I think all of us are trying to do that. And I'll shut up now for a little bit because I've been talking for way too long, and maybe hand it over to Danny to for a bit.
Filipe, I was actually going to ask, what are those news platforms that they're partnered with, or the direct partnerships for OpenAI?
Oh, there's so many. They've got a lot in the US, at least 30 media outlets. They've also got in Europe, the UK, Germany, Spain, France. Um, I remember some of the names, but I have a full list, so I can also share that with Jake and then to everyone if you'd like. But it's publicly available. You can just go on ChatGPT and also ask it, and it'll probably give it to
Yeah.
Yeah,
It might
that's
give you answers from last year, but it will give you answers. Um,
you.
does that maybe that's a boon for the PR industry? Because I feel like the press release is a thing that was like kind of a big deal or more of a big deal years ago than it is now. Um, And if that's maybe that's another signal that another way to get, an ancillary signal into the LLM.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's so many talks right now about offsite SEO,
Yeah.
and so many companies are, I think, investing more budget into like PR pushes and just AI mentions. I even saw an article, a report, not an article, that said that AI visibility is going to be the main investment for go-to-market leaders next year. For companies that are for SaaS companies that are no, actually B2B companies that are both and above 10 million AR. So that was quite interesting.
Yeah, now what have we have seen that while it is still single digits in terms of incoming traffic to a site, and as a side note, I think part of that is because people get more of the answer they're looking for in the first place, and they don't even end up going to the site necessarily because they've already figured out what it is they were trying to do. But what do you see in terms of the engagement metrics for traffic coming from an LLM versus a search engine? We have seen a higher engagement rate, meaning the people that are coming from LLMs tend to be more engaged once they get to the site and spend more
Mhm.
time and are more likely to purchase. What are you seeing in your experience?
Yeah. So we've had clients that are working with us now that I found us on AI. So it definitely converts. I
Yeah,
can see that.
we've gotten some.
Nice. I'm gonna go a step backwards here and try to bring up two things. You mentioned tracking, so attribution, as well as AI answers giving answers to users right away. And to those two topics, I think first of all, the current way we track traffic from LLMs is not perfect. I mean, I don't think there's a perfect way of tracking any sort of traffic or the actual source. But I say this because what happens is that people do their research. So the buying journey is just changing so much and is becoming more complex. So people may do a lot of their research on AI engines and actually get their problem solved by AI engines and then get recommendations for products or services in AI engines. But then what's happening, and everyone is also reporting this, is that they just copy and paste or just type in the name of that company or product or service on Google, and then they access the website through Google. And because it's the very last step in all of that journey, Google gets attributed all of the credit, right? And I think we all know from our own personal behaviors that that's not exactly true, at least speaking for myself. So that's the first thing I would say. And the second is in terms of content, I think what is going to happen a lot for effective marketing strategies is that bottom of funnel content, tying back that into content that solves problems, is going to become increasingly more relevant. And top of funnel content, like just informational content, is going to become less relevant. And I say this because AI engines are not going to be triggering the web search mode for top of funnel content. They'll just use our training data because it's cheaper. They don't have to trigger a search and spend energy and money on that. But for those more problem driven and purchase intent sort of queries, they will still trigger the web search mode. And I think that's what the future of AEO, SEO is going to be in the focus for next year.
Yeah, and to add a little bit to that, just kind of on the human psychology side of things, I don't have all the data on all the different channels for conversions from Google versus conversions from LLMs, but nobody's ever had a relationship with Google, but now people are having relationships with their LLMs. They can literally hear its voice and talk to it, and it can help them in dark moments or celebrating great ones. Imagine like then asking Google a question about a product recommendation versus asking your assistant, your friend, your trusted advisor about that. And that's why this trend is only going to go, in my opinion, in that direction more and more, just because it's way more emotional and high trust than standard search.
Well, if you just look at the information density of a LLM response versus a Google response, you've got, especially now and on mobile, I don't know, 90% of the screen is ads when you run a search engine. Um, and those ads are generally targeted well, but not always. And you're also getting whatever, slot machine of, I know when you set up a Google ad, you give it, 8 different titles and 10 different descriptions, and then it generally is going to mix and match those, right? So everyone is getting multivariate, A/B tested with a hodgepodge of text that have been put together that is the most likely to get someone to click on something. It's just a fundamentally different experience, right? It's like Times Square. You go there, it's just like all of this stuff, and almost none of it is actually answering the question that you asked, right? Um, I know for myself, when I'm looking for information, my behavior could not be more different than it was a couple of years ago, right? Like I don't generally ask Google to answer questions for me anymore. Um, so but that is, you know, since we're all working in this field, we're on the front end of that, right? There's probably still some people using AOL search somewhere. So, um, okay, so let's circle back to some practical examples. For someone, let's say that you've got someone who hasn't really had any kind of Reddit strategy at all. Danny, if you were going to take someone from zero to one, so to speak, on that, what would the first three like posts or threads or comments, how would you instruct someone to get started?
Yeah, I always personally recommend people getting started with commenting versus posting. First of all, some subreddits are really strict with posting, and you can get pretty quickly shut down or banned if you forget to read the rules. Reddit is the people that are being successful at Reddit are adding value first, and a great way to add value is in the comments. Furthermore, you're just answering questions. Like somebody's done half of the work by just asking the question, making the post, and you just get to search and go in and make a great comment. So for any brand out there, we always just recommend going into the comments first or comments on posts. And there's like two kind of main prototypical types of posts that you can look for. One's around just problem and solution, like what is your product or service solve for? And people are looking for that, whether it's, parents looking for a particular product for their kid or whatever that might be, or a particular shoe for a certain type of runner. And then just going in there, adding value, being genuine, helpful, factually accurate, and truthful, as we like to say. And then there's another side of things where it's product comparison. Maybe somebody asked about your direct competitor, and you could go in and provide an alternate view that is still genuine, helpful, factually accurate, and truthful. So those are the two different types of things. I would say really focus on that first because you're going to learn so much from that process, and then you can get on to posting. But that's where we'd say start.
Okay. Well, Felipe, I want to ask you a similar question. Um, what would you, where would you have someone start with their site and how they are going to structure it and what things they can do to go from, last year to this year, to
Yeah.
get their, your true asset as a brand is your domain, your owned and operated. That's where you actually have full agency and control. What are the first things people should look at doing?
Yeah, it's great. I thought you were going to ask me, oh, how to go from 0 to 1 in terms of AEO. And I was going to tell you, forget that, like start with the basics, because if you don't nail the basics, then you're not going to show up in answers. So to answer your question, uh, really start with the basics, like I was saying. And what I mean by that is making sure that you have the basic schema markup on your website organization. I've seen so many brands that don't have that still, which is quite simple to implement and just gives more structured data, a more structured way for the crawlers to interact with your website, which is really important and will become increasingly more important. Making sure that you have a good user experience, that your website is actually easy to navigate, because that does matter, especially in terms of SEO, and will matter for AI engines as well. And then if we're talking specifically about content, again, coming back to that topic that I was saying of consistency, try to post content consistently, whether that's weekly, bi-weekly. I think that's and also your tone. That's something that matters very much because what you want to do is to position yourself to the algorithm as an expert within your niche, that you are actually providing relevant information, and then when the crawler hits your website, you know that you are within this given topic and that you are a good source for it to get information from. So I would say start with the basics in terms of the technical markup, and then also the basics in terms of putting yourself out there content wise, and that the content is relevant to the niche that you're trying to rank for. That's how I'd really get started.
Yeah, and you mentioned tone, which
Yeah.
is subjective, but you can somewhat put some parameters on that. What tone would you recommend in the writing itself? Because ultimately, that's what's going to happen. It's going to be ingesting the text, right, and the copy, and judging it based on the quality of the writing and as you said, the tone. So actually, we didn't even mention that, but the quality of the writing should actually be good,
Yeah,
right? Because
definitely.
LLMs are, if they're good at one thing, it is language for sure, right? So bad grammar probably is not going to give you a lot of authority, but beyond the grammar and structure, there's a lot of different tones that you can take.
Yeah, I think the tone will be variable based on your own brand. So I'm saying this because there are some brands that take a more comical approach to writing and to publishing content, let's put it that way. Some are just more informative, direct. So I think that will really depend on also how you want your brand to be perceived. But then quality wise, coming back to that point, I think there are things that any business can do. And those are listening to your customers. So say, okay, you do calls with customers, meetings, and you have a note taker. Get insights, unique insights that only you have access to from those calls or even just from face-to-face interactions that you have, and try to convert those somehow into content. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because this is going to be something that your competitors won't have, right? That relationship that you have with your customers, the problems that they explain to you and that you're solving for them are most likely not going to be things that your customers, your competitors have. And those are unique insights that you can provide to readers, but also to the crawlers. And they will then be able to say, okay, this website is giving us something unique that no one else has. So that's the first part. And then the second is also to try and be as quantifiable as you can with your content. So if you can provide figures, specific outcomes, that also gives very authoritative signals to the crawlers, and that's also very well received by the AI engines and the crawlers from Google and so on.
Okay, great. I just want to take a moment for those of you that are specifically in the Zoom, there is a Q&A section. You can type in some questions if you have questions for Danny or Philippe. Um, and I think if you're on LinkedIn, you can ask questions there too, but we don't see them, but I think Courtney will answer them. So, um, we've been talking, all of this applies to all companies, but let's spend the last few minutes here talking about cannabis specifically, which is a lot of the audience that we get here. Traditionally, marketing has been very challenging for cannabis companies. That's actually why we started our company. Um, and some channels are easier than others. Let's take Google Ads, for example. Like we can run Google Ads. There's this sort of gray area where and we talked to Google about it. There's things you absolutely cannot do, so we don't do those things. And there's other things that they're like, just don't, be a good citizen and things will mostly work out well for you. Sometimes, you'll get flagged. Um, I haven't really noticed any strong bias from the LLMs in terms of talking about cannabis as a topic. I haven't seen too much of like, it doesn't say that, this violates our content standards. It seems like the LMs generally will talk about the topic of cannabis and will find information and give you suggestions. I know that this is not something that you guys focus in too much, but on the topic of LLMs and what could be a sensitive topic, what has your experience been, if any?
It's a good question, and I'll be honest, with sensitive, you mean as a user or as a company?
I mean, well, one leads into the other, right? So
Yeah,
if you're trying to produce content that is then going to get picked up by the LLM that will answer a question for a consumer, you know, in social media, so there's all these things. It's like social media where you just can't publish certain kinds of content. Like you just can't
yeah,
putting it out there actually has a negative effect. It gets you shut down,
yeah.
right? So it's pretty new. I haven't heard of any of this really happening, but as you're trying to produce content that's going to down chain, get picked up, and then and recommended, have you had any kind of experience with that?
Yeah, that's actually very interesting because I haven't put too much thought into this. No, to be completely honest, I haven't. And it's good to know that you've also haven't experienced any issues with that. And I guess also the fact that you're getting clients and traffic from LLMs is a signal that this is completely fine with them. And I guess if it is fine also for Google, then most likely it will be for most AI engines too. Now, to give something more tangible and practical, I will go back to what I said before. I think the next step for any company that wants to take something tangible out of this is to really focus on bottom of funnel content, right? And I will say this again because that's what we're focusing on, and that seems to be really one of the best ways to actually show up in AI answers is to try and produce content, web pages that will get people to know about your brand and drive traffic to your brand. So this could be, for example, Danny mentioned earlier, oh, people are going on Reddit and looking for best alternatives to XYZ brand. So this is what I mean by bottom of funnel content or best products for cannabis, something like that. It's not my niche, but this is exactly what I mean by bottom of funnel content, and this is what I think companies should focus on more and more.
Yeah. We've got a question from Sarah who wants to know if there are trends in LLM prompts that could and or should be mirrored in FAQs. So can you kind of reverse engineer the way that people are prompting and then how the LLM is going to respond to that? Because it's going to have to go look for an answer to that question, right? Can you game the system in the sense of kind of trying to predict what people are going to ask and then have that answer like bundled up nice and neat for the LLM?
Yeah, so I don't think there's any way to reverse engineer that unless you specifically know what your customers are looking for. And the best way to know that is by asking them. But that's not very scalable, right? It does help. I'll give two more scalable ways or more, yeah, scalable ways on how you can do this. The first is what I mentioned at the beginning, using Google Search Console and then trying to convert some of those queries into prompts. Like you already know what people are looking for on Google, and then trying to convert those into questions. And then the second, which is different to everything we've said so far, comes post sales or even before sales during the onboarding. It wouldn't be applicable here in cannabis e-commerce setting, but post sales or customer support. Like go through some of the complaints or requests that your customers have had and have sent you by email, and that's really good content that you can convert into questions. I actually went to a conference yesterday, SEO conference. There was this really huge enterprise company there. And this is what they're doing as well. They're going through some of their customer complaints or feedback and then converting those into questions and including them in their FAQ section. So this is something that you can do if you have that data, if you have that information.
Yeah, well, I actually would say for the cannabis industry, the post sales, it has a much higher repeat customer rate than other industries, right? Because it's consumable product generally, and a lot of the customers, maybe the cadence varies. It might be, twice a month or twice a year, but it does have a high incidence of people coming back, and that is actually one of the largest marketing disciplines that I think can be improved within the cannabis industry, which is customer retention. So understanding what questions or complaints that they have can feed into your pre-sales in the sense of let's get ahead of this. I guess the question there is how do you collect that information?
Yeah, I think you can, and we're doing that as well, with a completely different purpose and in a very different setting. But just sending out customers. to emails to your customers. Sorry, that's what I mean. And if you really want to take this seriously, you could even incentivize them by offering, I don't know, a discount on their next purchase or free shipping on their next purchase, because this is data that you can then use in your marketing content in these FAQs. So yeah, sending out emails to your clients, maybe chatbots on the website. That could also be a good way of collecting that information. So yeah, I'd say those two things.
All right. That makes sense. Well, we're coming up on time here. I did want to circle back a little bit, kind of to wrap up in terms of the things we've talked about today, and how, like, what exactly does AI Peekaboo do? Like, let's say I want you to help me with AI visibility. Is that the main
Yeah.
thing that we're after here?
Yeah, exactly. That's the right term. So what do we do and how we can help you? So we will help you by, first of all, helping you define what sort of questions, prompts you want to show up for in AI engines, and then understanding if you're showing up in those AI answers for those topics, those questions that you want to rank for. So basically, we define together a set of prompts, questions, if that's easier to understand, that you want to track because you know that are relevant for your niche in AI engines, right? And this could be if you have a huge competitor, alternatives to, or what are some alternatives to that competitor, and then understanding if you're being mentioned as an alternative or as a brand recommendation on the other prompts. So we do that by analyzing them in AI engines consistently, and then we showcase what are the brands mentioned, how your brand is perceived, how often it shows up in those AI answers, as well as the sources where the LLMs are actually pulling data from, so that you know perhaps what sort of content you should be producing, because the AI engines are constantly picking up content from those websites, web pages, and whether your content is being picked up by engines at all or not. And then there, perhaps there is some work that you should do in terms of the fundamentals of SEO as well.
Great. Um, And then on the Reddit side, I know it's hard to not just talk about AI like all the time. So sorry, Danny, we haven't gotten too much
It's
as
okay.
much into Reddit as we probably should have. Um, However, I think that Reddit has, the evolution of AI coming on the scene has actually made Reddit a more valuable resource than it was beforehand. I'm assuming you agree with that. And I'd be curious as to what you've seen over the last 12 to 18 months in terms, because you're living every day in Reddit, working on people's organic Reddit presence. Um, how has AI changed the landscape for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, first and foremost, I'm thankful that AI is scraping Reddit because that was a company that was unprofitable for over 2 decades, and finally they have a business model. So they're not going to go away, which is great, or anytime soon. And being a Reddit user, I'm happy for that. Yeah, I think the way I'm kind of looking at things and talking to our customers. When you're doing marketing on Reddit, you're actually getting almost three channels for kind of the price of one. So there's plenty of people that are native Reddit users like myself that don't need to search ChatGPT to find a Reddit link. We just go in there and search for a product, best running shoes for my next ultra race, whatever it is. And those people can be customers there. And then the LLMs are scraping this data. It's still a large single source of training data, and they're constantly going back over these. So then you get the AI search side of things. And then finally, with Google ranking Reddit links on page one. So it all kind of wraps into one. It's all kind of combining those channels together. But that is like the main reason that we tell our brands to get on that. And then the second one being, we're only seeing about 5% of all brands even aware that this is a thing currently. So the opportunity today is as big as it's going to get to have those outcomes for years to come.
And the other thing about Reddit content, it is kind of an annuity situation, right? Because it's there. Um, and it stays there, and you can build upon that. So I am also a
Yeah,
big
I think
Reddit user. So
yeah, and it's actually kind of funny when we were all like talking about how they can lock the comments, and maybe that's kind of a bummer. But what if the comments are really good and they get locked forever? Like you said, Jake, an annuity. It's just like, wow, this is ranking link number one on Google. Great comments forever. Like, yeah, that sounds pretty good to me.
Great. Well, let's remind everyone, Danny, it's ReddiReach.
Yep. Yeah, you can find us at ReddiReach.com, ReddiReach.com. I'm active on LinkedIn as well. You could probably type in Danny Kirk and ReddiReach, or my handle is Daniel P. Kirk on LinkedIn. So reach out to me either way and be happy to give you some free advice.
Perfect. And Philippe, what is your domain and how do people find you other than just asking about you and ChatGPT?
Yeah, so we're AI Peekaboo. So you can find us at aipeekaboo.com. And like Danny, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out. And we're doing a 2 month free trial right now. We're trying to get feedback from users on our onboarding flow. So if that's of interest to you, you'd like to test this out for a little bit, feel free to reach out as well, and more than happy to see how we can help you.
Hard to argue with a 2 month free trial.
Yeah.
Not a lot to lose there. So, well, thanks, guys. I appreciate your time and expertise today. I've certainly learned a few things that I'll try to apply to our own brand. And have a great day. And Philippe, get some rest in over there in Portugal. I guess it's not too late for you, but
Yeah, no, it's fine. But I appreciate you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much.